Greetings and salutations, this is Brian from Mechbladestudios. What better way is there to start a channel that was something related to the most contested and controversial anime in recent years, Sword Art Online. People love it, people hate it. That said, most people say that the games based on Reki Kawahara's light novel turned anime outclass the source materials themselves, if not usually by much. The latest entry in the series, Sword Art Online Fatal Bullet, is probably the biggest improvement thus far. The previous games in the series have always focused on swordplay in fantasy VR MMORPGs, but this game takes place in a VR shooter game called Gun Gale Online. The plot is another major shift from the norm in that it does not focus on the franchise's protagonist Kirito. Instead, you play as a silent, customizable avatar invited into the game by your childhood friend Kureha for assistance in acquiring an ultra-rare item. Because of a sudden warp gate, you end up in possession of the item by accident, which turns out to be a customizable AI called an Artificial Financial Advisor System, or ArFA-Sys for short, or Ray according to characters that aren't you. The game gets extra fanfiction-y when you meet Kirito and he invites you into his giant group of friends after you apparently beat him and Asuna to the ArFA-Sys. From then on, the majority of the rest of the game is you leveling up to take on a new in-game raid called the SBC Flugel. No, really, besides meeting a few more new characters, that is the plot to the game. On top of that, the game doesn't really give you any in-game lore outside of a throwaway line that the hub world and the Flugel are alien spaceships, in which we see no aliens. There's nothing to contextualize the regions, enemies, or samey-looking dungeons. The game, for the most part, is about playing a game. Well, the plot does pick up shortly before you actually do the raid, bringing in the death gun plot from the show's second season, which gets extended to the point where you and the other new characters are involved. Once you complete the raid, though I don't recommend that you do that right away for reasons I'll explain later, you do unlock Kirito mode, a short, i.e. 45 minutes tops campaign where you play as Kirito in a modified retelling of the death gun arc from the show. Once that's done, there's not much of a reason to play this after you complete it, other than watching affinity cutscenes with the other characters. You can't even change your weapons. The graphics are good. They're nothing to write home about, given that the game is just a 3D interpretation of an anime, but as vague and ill-explained as the world of GGO is, it's at least nice to look at when it's not repeating itself. The same goes for the soundtrack of the game. There are a few cool tracks here and there, like the opening theme, the title screen, and a few dungeon themes, but it's mostly an unmemorable mix between rock and electronic music. The gameplay is somewhat difficult to get used to if you play a lot of shooters, but once you get used to it, it's a lot of fun. First and foremost, the aiming isn't as simple as just pointing at a target and pulling the trigger. Instead, the game uses bullet circles that pulsate over targets. The smaller they are, the more accurate your shot will be. This system is in place whenever you shoot from the hip through the assist window or aim down your sights, and it becomes important to use both firing styles. Raise your dexterity stat enough and you can mow down most of your enemies with just the assist window unless you're sniping. All guns give off a bullet line, which enemies and opponents can see and have a chance to dodge or deflect. Second, there's no cover system. The most you can do is stand or crouch behind cover. The game will not let you snap to cover. You can shoot from behind cover by switching hands, but it still doesn't lock you to it. Most of the time you'll be keeping yourself alive by dodging or healing, either from yourself or your teammates. On top of these mechanics, upon acquiring your ArFA-Sys, it gives you a weapon called the Ultra Fiber Gun, which is essentially a grapple gun. You can use it to reach ledges, take down enemies, or make dodging easier. Fatal Bullet is an RPG with a third-person shooter engine rather than a third-person shooter with RPG elements. It requires grinding to get your stats up, getting good weapons from drops, enhancing said weapons, and building up your abilities in the forms of skills and gadgets. Skills and gadgets are the successors to sword skills and spells from the previous games. Skills include abilities like healing, buffing stats, hiding your bullet lines, shrinking your bullet circles, sword skills if you're using a light sword, among other things. Gadgets include items like grenades, landmines, and melee knives. By the way, fast travel in this game is either fantastic or broken. You can warp from your house to boss rooms as long as you hit the checkpoints. Your ArFA-Sys is essentially a second avatar, which is the only character other than yourself whose weapons, stats, outfit, equipment, skills, and gadgets you can modify. The Financial Advisor title refers to the fact that it can hold on to your credits and even invest and grow them, which can get insanely high if you get lucky and wind up only needing to buy bullets every now and again. You can also give it an allowance and send it to buy weapons, equipment, and resources, but the stuff it actually buys tends to vary in quality. You can also use it to customize your outfits to whatever color you want. It's not a perfect customization system, but more often than not, you can make some of the more boring outfits look badass. You can also adjust its mannerisms in different situations. Okay, pro tip, do not set its after battle emote to anything other than standby, otherwise after every kill you get, it'll stop in its tracks, do an emote, or apparently setting the ArFA-Sys' general demeanor to serious means it'll clap and say, and probably get you killed. Speaking of AI, you can command your AI partners in different ways, either to act on their own, group up on you, focus on healing, focus on attacking, defend a point, or just not move at all. For the most part, this works well when your ArFA-Sys isn't clapping away. When you need them to change tactics, they'll immediately do so. They do have problems though. They do tend to aggro enemies you don't want to fight, not heal or revive you right away even if they're in heal mode, and fall behind if you run too far ahead. Provided that you understand that the cryptic PT button in your friends list means add to party, when you go out in quest, you can have up to 3 additional party members. The more time you spend with them, the more you encourage them after they get a medal, the more affinity you build up with them. These cutscenes are done in a more traditional visual novel style in the previous games using 2D sprites. Here they use the 3D models instead of sprites, that they still slide in and out of scenes like static sprites, so why do they bother? On top of that, most of the cutscenes involve action. Action that could make for some fun missions, but it's all off screen. Hell, the game does show that action once. There is a mission where you accompany Xenon to fight a boss, one you've already fought but still, and you actually fight the boss with only Xenon, adding an extra bit of challenge to the boss fight. Why the game doesn't do this more than this one mission is beyond me. Another issue is that you have very little inventory space. You can drop items you don't need in an item box in your room, but you'll be going back there every other outing or so in higher levels. Enemies in treasure boxes drop weapons of various classes and strengths, outfits, head accessories, and materials. These materials can be given to Asuna to make outfits or Elizabeth to enhance your weapons. You'll often also pick up unappraised weapons that you have to bring to A Guild to appraise so you can actually use them. For better or for worse, these items still have their descriptions and rarity symbols intact before you appraise them, so you'll know whether or not you should actually spend your money to appraise them. Without giving too much about the plot away, there are multiple endings. This is where that caveat about the Flugel mission comes in. Getting the true ending requires you get at least affinity level 4 at 75% with all the new characters and at least affinity level 2 with all the canon and previous game characters, watch all the cutscenes in both normal and Kirito mode, get the trophies for Asuna's outfits, Eagle's appraisals, and Elizabeth's weapon mods, and get the ArFA-Sys amulet or charm after clearing Kirito mode. All of this has to be done before the end of the SBC Flugel mission. I ended up getting a different ending first. Fortunately, the game actually allows you to go back in time before this mission and let you get everything you need for the better ending without having to start a new save or do New Game Plus. Fatal Bullet has 2 online multiplayer modes. I mean, it'd be silly to have a shooter game called Gun Gale online without online play, so of course it has multiplayer. But it's very limited. The co-op mode is just boss fights, which is really only fun if you have friends or other people with mics in your party. There's also a PvP mode, but all the quests are just deal the most damage to the boss rather than deathmatch or capture the flag and such. Also, not that many people are playing it, so it's clear that multiplayer isn't exactly a huge draw to the game. Hey, at least it makes more sense than Mass Effect's multiplayer. Doesn't even have microtransactions. So overall, I give Sword Art Online Fatal Bullet a 7 out of 10. It comes very close to becoming a great game with its fun gunplay and deep leveling systems, but its lackluster story, janky menus, and iffy AI hold it back. I happen to enjoy it quite a bit, but it's not for everyone, especially if you don't follow the show or the other games. So that's it for me today, and you want me to talk about the show, don't you? I'm not going to give the SAO anime its own review right now because so many other people have already talked about it, though I might come back to it when Season 3 and that GGO spin-off come out and run their course. As for me, I think it's okay, or rather, I think all of its parts average out to being okay. The initial Aincrad arc was compelling enough despite its complete bullshit ending. All Fine was boring, cringy, and reprehensible.
I'm in love with my brother.
Phantom Bullet, on which Fatal Bullet was based, was a lot of fun and had a surprising amount of character development, but still contained its share of logical leaps. It's my favorite arc despite its issues. Excalibur was boring fluff, and Mother's Rosario was interesting. Its pace was kind of off, but at least it fixed Asuna as a character and had a legitimate emotional gut punch of an ending. It's far from a perfect show, and I hesitate to call it an objectively good show at all, but I happen to enjoy it despite its glaring shortcomings. I think it comes down to the characters. Other than, say, Leafa, I don't have a serious problem with any of them. Kirito's kind of flat and overpowered, yeah, but once you adjust yourself to the mindset that this is just a wish fulfillment anime with decent action, he's serviceable enough. All the other characters fall into their usual tropes, but they stop just short of being annoying that I don't mind them. It's why I enjoy the games more than the show. You can spend time with the characters and actually do something in between the shoddily written plot. I'd say watch the abridged version of SAO if you want true character development. I don't love SAO, but I don't hate it either. So that's it for me for now. If you enjoyed this review, leave a like and subscribe for weekly reviews of anime, video games, and movies. This is Brian from Mechbladestudios, signing off.